Far away from the action of World War II Europe, strange things were happening. Off the coast of the Portuguese state of Goa in India, German U-boats had been massacring Allied convoys with impossible accuracy. It was something never seen before. Allied ships vanished within hours of leaving port, and the area quickly became a black hole, at least for every ship except one. At the middle of it sat a bizarre abandoned cargo vessel that was more than it appeared. If the Allies wanted the truth, someone would have to get on that ship and destroy it. If caught, their governments would disavow them. It would be a mission that officially didn't exist at all. When war erupted across Europe in September 1939, 3 hulking German merchant vessels, Ehrenfels, Braunfels, and Drachenfels, found themselves caught in the crossfire of global conflict. Each displacing over 7,000 tons of steel and cargo, made a desperate dash for neutral waters as the Royal Navy's hunting groups began their lethal patrols. Their sanctuary came in the form of Mormugao Harbor, nestled along the sun-baked coast of Portuguese Goa. The 3 ships dropped anchor in the protected waters, their engines falling silent as international law wrapped them in a cocoon of forced neutrality. Portugal's precarious position meant these Axis vessels could remain indefinitely, but they were prisoners as much as they were protected, forbidden from sailing to any other port. A year later, the Italian freighter Anfora limped into the same harbor, adding a 4th silhouette to the growing fleet of stranded wartime refugees. The crews gradually melted away from their ships, some finding odd jobs in the sultry colonial port, others simply scavenging what they could from local markets. To passing merchant captains and curious tourists, the 4 vessels appeared as nothing more than rusting hulks, slumbering relics slowly deteriorating under the merciless Indian Ocean sun. But beneath this facade of decay, something far more sinister was taking shape. At first, British naval intelligence dismissed the Goa situation as a minor inconvenience. The stranded ships posed no immediate threat. They were unarmed, clearly confined, and operating within the bounds of international maritime law. The Royal Navy had bigger fish to fry, tracking German surface raiders and hunting U-boat wolf packs across the Atlantic's battlefields. But by 1942, the strategic landscape had shifted dramatically. The Indian Ocean transformed from a sleepy colonial backwater into a critical arterial route for the Allied war machine. Black gold flowed from Persian Gulf refineries, natural rubber moved from Malaysian plantations, tin cascaded from Burmese mines, and grain shipments departed East African ports, all bound for British forces stretched thin from the western desert to the Burma frontier. Major ports like Bombay and Karachi became nerve centers of Allied logistics, their docks crammed with cargo vessels and tankers, loading supplies for distant battlefields. But the Royal Navy's escort groups were spread dangerously thin, unable to provide adequate protection across thousands of miles of ocean highway. This vulnerability created a hunter's paradise for Axis submarines, prowling the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. German U-boats, operating from bases in occupied France and later from Japanese-controlled Penang, began stalking Allied convoys with methodical precision. They attacked with devastating efficiency, torpedoes streaking through moonlit waters, deck guns barking at crippled merchantmen, and hunting packs coordinating attacks like wolves bringing down prey. The sinkings accelerated through 1942, with attacks occurring mere hours after ships cleared port, turning supposedly safe routes into underwater graveyards. British signals intelligence stations scattered across India began picking up disturbing patterns in their intercepts. The Special Operations Executive's listening post in Meerut, housed in a nondescript building surrounded by radio masts and code-breaking equipment, detected coded transmissions originating from deep within the subcontinent. These weren't random submarine communications. They were coordinated intelligence reports directly linked to German U-boat movements. The mathematics of destruction didn't lie. Shipping losses around the Indian subcontinent were catastrophically high, far exceeding what random submarine patrols could achieve through luck alone. Someone was feeding the hunters precise information about convoy routes, cargo manifests, and departure times. Suspicion gradually focused on the merchant ships anchored at Mormugao. The German and Italian vessels had remained motionless for over 2 years, but their strategic position raised alarming concerns. These maritime ghosts appeared to be operating as clandestine radio relay stations, serving as the nerve center of an intelligence network that was severely disrupting Allied shipping. By late 1942, intercepted radio traffic suggested there might be a human element in the conspiracy, a courier based somewhere in neutral Goa, possibly relaying vital intelligence between the ships and German submarine command. The source didn't seem to be on the water, but appeared to be moving through the streets of the colonial capital. The intelligence trail led directly to Panaji, Goa's administrative heart, where palm trees swayed over Portuguese colonial architecture and the pace of life moved with tropical languor. Hidden within this peaceful facade lived Robert Koch, a German national whose innocuous exterior masked a shadowy profession. Codenamed Trumpet by his Gestapo handlers, Koch operated as the crucial human link between Ehrenfels and the U-boat command structure. Koch and his wife, Greta, had established themselves as quiet, unremarkable residents of the neutral colony. They maintained a modest lifestyle, attended local social functions, and blended seamlessly into the expatriate community. But British intelligence suspected that Koch's true role involved collecting shipping intelligence from a network of Axis sympathizers operating throughout British India, then transmitting this information via the secret radio aboard Ehrenfels. The decision to eliminate Koch came from the highest levels of the Special Operations Executive. In November 1942, two seasoned officers received orders for an extraction mission that would push the boundaries of international law. Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Pugh, SOE specialist in delicate operations, partnered with Colonel Valentine Stewart for what would become one of the war's most audacious kidnapping operations. Crossing from British territory into Portuguese Goa required careful preparation and flawless execution. Pugh and Stewart adopted civilian identities, complete with forged documents and rehearsed cover stories. They spent weeks conducting surveillance, learning the Koch's daily routines, mapping their movements, and identifying the perfect moment to strike. On December 19, 1942, opportunity presented itself. Using a carefully crafted deception, the two officers lured Koch and his wife from their home under false pretenses. The snatch happened quickly, quietly, and professionally. Under cover of darkness, they smuggled their prisoners back across the border into British India, leaving no trace of their presence. The Kochs found themselves transported to Castle Rock, a remote railway junction hidden deep in the Western Ghats mountain range. The location was perfect for covert interrogation, isolated, secure, and far from prying eyes. British intelligence officers worked methodically to extract confirmation of their suspicions about the Axis espionage network. Under intense questioning, the true scope of the operation began to emerge. Ehrenfels wasn't just a stranded merchant vessel. It was a sophisticated command post equipped with powerful radio transmission equipment. The ship served as the communications hub for a network of Axis agents operating throughout the Indian subcontinent, collecting intelligence on Allied shipping movements and feeding this information directly to German U-boat command. The intelligence network relied on pro-Axis sympathizers embedded within India's ports, shipping companies, and transportation infrastructure. These agents reported convoy schedules, cargo manifests, and route information to Koch, who then transmitted the data via coded messages to Ehrenfels. From there, the ship's radio operators relayed targeting information to prowling U-boats, turning the Indian Ocean into a perfectly orchestrated hunting ground. What happened to Robert and Greta Koch after their interrogation remains a mystery. They disappeared from official records. No trial, no repatriation, no further mention. Some believe they were quietly resettled into new identities, perhaps recruited or hidden away by British intelligence. Others suspect a darker end, erased in the name of security. Despite the removal of Koch, Ehrenfels continued operating its radio network. The ship's transmitter kept broadcasting, and Allied shipping losses continued mounting at an alarming rate. British diplomatic protest to the Portuguese colonial government fell on deaf ears. Lisbon's neutrality provided the Germans with an impregnable legal shield. Then, the U-boat campaign in the Indian Ocean reached fever pitch in early 1943. During the first week of March alone, German submarines achieved a devastating tactical victory, sinking 12 Allied merchant vessels representing the flags of the United States, Britain, Norway, and the Netherlands. The combined tonnage lost exceeded 80,000 tons of desperately needed supplies, enough cargo to sustain entire armies for months. The coordinated nature of these attacks left no doubt about their source. The strikes demonstrated sophisticated intelligence gathering, precise timing, and intimate knowledge of Allied shipping patterns. British naval intelligence concluded that Ehrenfels represented the linchpin of the entire operation, the nerve center that transformed random submarine patrols into a coordinated campaign of destruction. Diplomatic pressure on Portugal continued to fail. The colonial government in Goa remained steadfast in its neutrality, refusing to interfere with the Axis vessels, regardless of Allied protests. The British faced an impossible choice: accept the continued hemorrhaging of their supply lines or risk international condemnation by violating Portuguese sovereignty. The solution demanded something unprecedented: a covert operation that would eliminate the threat while maintaining plausible deniability. Plans took shape for a wild screwball mission straight out of a Hollywood comedy. The genesis of Operation Creek began with an absurd conversation between two old friends in early 1943. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Pugh, the SOE's master of impossible missions, faced a peculiar recruiting challenge. He needed volunteers for a covert operation with minimal chance of survival and zero prospect of official recognition. Naturally, he called Bill Grice, commanding officer of the Calcutta Light Horse, a volunteer cavalry regiment that epitomized the amateur spirit of British colonial military tradition. The unit had served with distinction for 185 years, but its modern incarnation was better known for social events and ceremonial duties than combat operations. Most members were middle-aged expatriates, retired officers, and patriotic businessmen who treated military service as an exciting hobby rather than a profession. The idea of transforming these weekend warriors into a commando strike force seemed preposterous, but Pugh's options were limited. Regular military units would raise too many questions, and professional commandos weren't available for what amounted to a rogue operation. The mission required men who could blend in as civilians, while possessing enough military experience to handle complex combat operations. Pugh explained to Grice that they needed between 15 and 20 men willing to face the risk of capture or worse, without any promises of medals, pensions, or public credit. It was a secret cause, with no safety net. Grice responded dryly, remarking on how appealing Pugh made the conditions sound. Despite the dangers, Grice agreed to help. A recruitment meeting was called quickly. At the gathering, Grice told the assembled men very little about what they were signing up for. He informed his assembled volunteers, quote, "I can tell you nothing about it, except that the operation should take about a fortnight and will involve a short sea voyage. There it is, gentlemen. I leave it to you. Is anyone willing to volunteer?" Without hesitation, every hand shot up. Selection proceeded quickly and pragmatically. Physical fitness was the main factor, and volunteers who were too old, soft, or overweight were reluctantly cut. When one member, Bill Manners, worried that his glass eye might compromise the mission, Grice dismissed the concern with characteristic humor, quote, "It was good enough for Nelson. Why shouldn't it be all right for you?" Manners made the team. The final roster comprised 18 men, mostly drawn from the Calcutta Light Horse, with 4 additional volunteers from the Calcutta Scottish Regiment. They represented a cross-section of colonial society: businessmen, planters, clerks, and former soldiers united by their willingness to risk everything for a cause they barely understood. Training time was brutally short. With only days to prepare, the volunteers immersed themselves in crash courses covering ship-to-ship assault techniques, demolitions, small unit tactics, and emergency medical procedures. They studied detailed blueprints of Ehrenfels, memorizing the layout of corridors, compartments, and critical systems. Mock-up exercises simulated boarding procedures under combat conditions, with emphasis on speed, coordination, and adaptability. The plan itself was elegantly simple, yet breathtakingly audacious. A small strike team would infiltrate Mormugao Harbor aboard an inconspicuous vessel, board Ehrenfels under cover of darkness, neutralize the crew, destroy the radio transmitter, and escape before Portuguese authorities could respond. To maintain plausible deniability, the raiders would pose as drunken revelers lost on a pleasure cruise, a cover so ridiculous that given the men's appearance, it just might work. Success depended on precise timing, flawless execution, and considerable luck. Operation Creek was about to transform 18 middle-aged gentlemen into the most unlikely heroes in naval warfare history. The men of the British strike force exchanged uneasy glances as they approached the harbor, spotting their transport for the first time. Murmurs rippled through the group. This couldn't be serious. The vessel they were about to board was no warship. It was HMS Phoebe, a slow, battered hopper barge usually used for dredging, with rusted sides and creaky wooden decks. Its shabby, unassuming look made it almost laughable. Yet that was precisely what made it perfect. Commander Bernard Davis, a seasoned Royal Navy officer, stood calmly at the helm, his quiet confidence the only reassurance the men needed. As darkness fell over Goa, the nearby town of Vasco da Gama erupted in carnival celebrations. Streets filled with revelers wearing elaborate costumes and masks, while music and laughter echoed through the warm night air. The festivities provided perfect cover for the most crucial element of the operation, Jock Cartwright's masterful diversion. Using funds provided by the Special Operations Executive, Cartwright organized an extravagant party in Vasco that would have impressed Roman emperors. Free food, unlimited alcohol, and professional entertainment drew massive crowds, including most of the German and Italian crews from the anchored ships. Ehrenfels dominated the anchorage, its 7,900-ton bulk casting long shadows across the water as the sun traced its arc across the tropical sky. The sailors, desperate for excitement after years of enforced inactivity, abandoned their vessels in droves to join the celebration. By 10 p.m., Ehrenfels maintained only a skeleton watch, barely enough men to satisfy maritime regulations, but nowhere near sufficient to repel a determined assault. Even nature seemed to conspire in favor of the raiders. Both the harbor lighthouse and the illuminated navigation buoy marking the entrance mysteriously failed simultaneously, plunging the anchorage into complete darkness. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. At exactly 2:30 a.m., Phoebe's engines roared to life, grinding and coughing as the slow, clumsy barge surged forward. Commander Davis gripped the wheel, eyes locked on the dark silhouette of Ehrenfels looming ahead. Inch by inch, Phoebe lumbered closer, its battered bow aimed like a battering ram. With a deafening crash, steel met steel. Metal screeched and buckled under the force as the barge slammed into Ehrenfels' starboard side. The collision served as the signal for assault. 18 British volunteers, armed with Sten guns, Mills bombs, and demolition charges, swarmed over Phoebe's bow onto Ehrenfels' deck. The German watch, caught completely off guard, stumbled from their quarters in various states of undress, struggling to comprehend what was happening. The ship erupted into turmoil. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness as automatic weapons chattered, their distinctive rattling echoing across the water. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Pugh led the assault team through the ship's narrow, twisting corridors, his men moving with cold precision. Dim emergency lights threw long shadows as they swept each compartment, crushing resistance without hesitation. Their target lay deep within the superstructure, the radio room, the beating heart of the German spy network. After fierce fighting, they reached the communications hub, a tangle of transmitters, coding machines, and stacks of secret files. The raiders tore through the equipment, smashing everything in sight. Pugh's team moved fast. With the codebooks already burning, they planted charges across the radio room, under benches, in the wiring, behind the transmitters. Once set, the countdown began. They bolted, boots pounding over steel as they cleared the corridor. Moments later, a sharp blast rocked the ship. The radio compartment erupted in flame and shrapnel. Irreplaceable transmitters and decoding gear were obliterated, leaving the U-boat network suddenly and permanently silent. Ehrenfels' crew fought fiercely, but several, including their captain, did not make it through the assault, their final stand ending in bullets and flames. As the battle raged aboard Ehrenfels, panic spread to the other Axis vessels anchored nearby. The other three vessels, Drachenfels, Braunfels, and Amphora, erupted in frantic activity as their crews realized the gravity of the situation. Rather than allow their ships to fall into British hands, they made the ultimate sacrifice, scuttling their own vessels to deny the enemy any prize. The sound of seacocks opening echoed across the harbor as desperate men smashed valves and flooded compartments. Water rushed into the ship's holds with a roar like breaking surf, and the vessels began listing heavily as they settled toward the harbor bottom. Crew members fled the burning ship in a frantic rush, plunging into the dark water and fighting their way to shore, only to be rounded up by the Portuguese and locked away in Aguada jail. Ehrenfels itself was doomed. German survivors, following their comrades' example, began flooding the engine room and holds, and the great vessel began its final dive toward the harbor floor. The ship listed dangerously to port, its superstructure lifting at increasingly acute angles as flooding accelerated. British raiders worked frantically to evacuate before the ship became a watery trap. They cut mooring lines, gathered intelligence materials, and herded prisoners toward Phoebe, which remained locked against Ehrenfels' side. Commander Davis demonstrated superb seamanship, using every ounce of Phoebe's limited power to break free from the sinking giant. A terse radio message cut through the night, quote, "Longshanks." The single code word confirmed that Operation Creek had achieved its objectives. The Axis intelligence network in the Indian Ocean was broken, its ships destroyed, and its personnel captured or eliminated. Portuguese authorities responded with predictable confusion and outrage. Local newspapers reported that the German crews had mutinied, but the Judicial Court of Mormugao eventually dismissed any suggestion of foreign attack. On October 1, 1943, the court convicted surviving sailors of deliberately destroying their vessels, sentencing them to imprisonment until the war's end, a convenient fiction that preserved Portuguese neutrality. The immediate impact of Operation Creek was dramatic and measurable. For the rest of March, 13 German U-boats operating in the Indian Ocean sank only one Allied merchant vessel. April's toll rose to 3 ships, still a fraction of the devastating losses inflicted during the previous months. The destruction of Ehrenfels' radio network had effectively blinded the submarine force, transforming them from coordinated hunters into random predators operating on luck alone. Despite its strategic importance, Operation Creek remained buried in the deepest vaults of official secrecy. The volunteer raiders received no medals, no recognition, and no public acknowledgement of their achievement. They designed their own commemoration, a seahorse emblem that symbolized their unique contribution to the war effort. The Calcutta Light Horse and Calcutta Scottish were disbanded after Indian independence in 1947, their members scattering to the 4 winds of post-colonial transition. The full story of their greatest moment remained classified until 1974, when declassified British government files finally revealed the truth about that March night in Mormugao Harbor. In 1951, the Port Trust salvaged the 4 wrecked vessels with assistance from a German expatriate who had remained in Goa after the war. More recently, plans emerged to scrap the remaining fragments of the ships that had once terrorized Allied shipping lanes. The world finally learned about Operation Creek in 1978, when journalist James Lesser brought the story to public attention for the first time. The tale was later dramatized in the 1980 film The Sea Wolves, starring Gregory Peck, Roger Moore, and David Niven, Hollywood's tribute to the most unlikely heroes in naval warfare history. Documents released in 2002 provided fascinating epilogues to the story. 3 Axis crew members who surrendered during the raid subsequently worked with SOE operations throughout India before returning home after the war, a remarkable transformation from enemies to allies. The files also confirmed that the British had hoped to capture the ships intact, but rapid scuttling by their crews prevented this outcome. Though long overlooked, Operation Creek proved that even a group of aging patriots posing as drunken tourists on a pleasure cruise could pull off one of the war's most audacious missions. The men didn't ask for medals or headlines, but their success was toast-worthy all the same. As Alistair Red Mac McFarlane, one of the men of the Calcutta Light Horse, put it, quote, "To drink to deeds of daring, and the men will have to do 'em."